I had always considered myself an observant person, able to read the small nuances of human behavior. Yet, it was with a heavy heart that I realized I had ignored the signs that my wife, Mary, had changed. It started subtly. The warmth in her gaze had begun to fade, replaced by a distant look that made me feel as if I were a mere shadow in her life. I often found her lost in thought, staring out the window at the world beyond, her mind seemingly miles away from our shared reality. At first, I brushed it off as stress from work. Mary had always been passionate about her career, pouring her energy into her job at a prestigious marketing firm. I thought she was simply overwhelmed by deadlines and meetings, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind kept insisting that something was amiss. I wanted to trust her, I wanted to believe that everything was fine. But the more I tried to ignore my instincts, the louder they became. One evening, while Mary was in the shower, I found myself wandering into our bedroom. Where her phone lay on the nightstand, its screen flickering with a new message. It was a moment of temptation that I couldn't resist. Just a glance wouldn't hurt, I reasoned. I felt a surge of guilt as I picked it up, but curiosity quickly overwhelmed my conscience. I pressed the button to unlock her phone, which had been carelessly left open. The screen lit up, revealing a series of messages exchanged between her and a colleague named Daniel. At first, I thought they were harmless. They joked about mundane office happenings and exchanged playful banter that seemed innocent enough. But as I scrolled deeper, my heart sank. There were whispers of late-night meetings, a shared bottle of wine, and inside jokes that no longer felt innocent. My pulse quickened as I felt the walls of my reality closing in. The messages hinted at something more, an unmistakably intimate connection. I read a line that pierced me to the core: "I can't wait to see you again." Last time was magical. The words felt like a dagger, twisting in my chest. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. A wave of disbelief washing over me. My hands trembled as I tried to process what I had just uncovered. Mary, the woman I had built my life with, the one I trusted completely, had betrayed me. I felt the weight of betrayal settling in like an unwelcome guest. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Had I been so blind to her changes? I remembered the late nights she'd claimed were filled with work, the constant phone calls and texts that I had attributed to her busy schedule. Now, it all made sense, and yet, it felt surreal. I knew I needed more than just this single glimpse into her betrayal. I needed proof. The uncertainty gnawed at me, and a plan began to form in my mind. I had to gather evidence, to confront this reality head-on. I couldn't just let it slip away as if it were a bad dream. The next day, I started my mission. I followed her discreetly, taking careful notes of her schedule. It was painful to watch her, but I was determined to see the truth for myself. I noted every meeting and every late night at the office, every time she'd leave with a smile, knowing she'd be meeting him. I saw how her demeanor changed when she was with him, the laughter that rang out like a melody that no longer belonged to me. One evening, I watched from a distance as she met Daniel outside a trendy cafe, the way they leaned in close to whisper, their shared laughter ringing in the cool night air. A lump formed in my throat as I felt the betrayal slice deeper. I took pictures, capturing every moment, every glance that passed between them. This would be my arsenal, my insurance, and my truth. Every time I saw them together, it fueled the fire of my resolve. I was not going to confront her yet, I needed to be calculated. This wasn't just about seeking vengeance, it was about reclaiming my dignity, about making sure that when I did confront her, I would have all the facts laid bare before her. The world around me felt like it was closing in. Each day I collected evidence, each moment a reminder of the life I thought I had. I felt like a detective in my own life, piecing together clues to reveal the shocking reality I never wanted to face. And with every photograph, every note, I was preparing for the inevitable confrontation, the moment when I would lay bare the truth that had been hidden in the shadows. As I sat in my car, parked across the street from the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that coursed through my veins. The pain was raw and fresh, but amidst the heartache, there was a sense of purpose building within me. I wasn't going to be the victim. No, I would take charge of my narrative, and when the time came, I would ensure that Mary understood the true cost of her betrayal. The revelation of Mary's betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me under into a sea of confusion and despair. It was as if my entire world had been turned upside down, leaving me disoriented and gasping for air. I had anticipated anger, sadness, and perhaps even a violent confrontation. Yet, in that moment of clarity, I felt an unexpected sense of calm wash over me. Instead of succumbing to the emotional storm brewing inside, I chose to remain still. The rage that bubbled beneath the surface was a flickering flame, but I kept it at bay, knowing I needed to approach this situation with a clear mind. The calm was deceptive, and beneath that surface tranquility, I was orchestrating a battle plan. I had always prided myself on being rational, and I realized that emotional outbursts would only cloud my judgment. I was not going to give in to the chaos that threatened to overwhelm me. I was going to channel that energy into something far more productive: revenge. I began to analyze the situation like a chess game, with each move calculated and each decision strategic. I recognized that Mary was not just my wife but also a woman deeply invested in her career, one that defined her identity and status. The more I reflected on this, the more I realized how pivotal her job was to her sense of self-worth. I had seen her thrive in the corporate world, earning accolades and respect from her peers. It was her sanctuary, a place where she felt powerful and admired. But now, it was time to use that very sanctuary against her. As I sat alone in the quiet of my office, I began sketching out my plan. The goal was clear: to dismantle the very foundation of her career and confidence without directly confronting her. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices, to understand that her betrayal had consequences far beyond just our marriage. My thoughts swirled around the idea of how I could expose her unfaithfulness in a way that would not only shatter her reputation but also leave her feeling vulnerable and alone. I envisioned a multi-step plan, one that would unfold gradually, like a well-crafted plot in a thriller novel. First, I needed to gather more evidence, not just for my satisfaction but to ensure that I had the upper hand when the time came. I continued to document her interactions with Daniel, compiling an arsenal of photographs, texts, and emails. I wanted every detail, every nuance of their relationship, captured and preserved like pieces of a puzzle. I needed to ensure that when I revealed this betrayal, it would be irrefutable and devastating. Next, I thought about her workplace. I had some connections within her company, friends I had made through various networking events. I began to reach out to them subtly, discussing topics like office gossip and recent changes within the firm. I was careful to ask questions that would lead me to understand her relationships with her colleagues, especially those who might be influential. It was a delicate dance, one that required finesse, but I was committed to playing my part. I began to craft a narrative in my mind. What if I could drop subtle hints to those in her circle? What if I could create an environment of suspicion around her? If I could plant the seeds of doubt among her peers, it would be a slow burn that would eventually engulf her career in flames. I imagined whispers in the break room, side glances during meetings, and the discomfort of her colleagues as they speculated about her loyalty. The thought exhilarated me. I wasn't just plotting revenge, I was reclaiming my power, ensuring that the world Mary had built around her would begin to crumble under the weight of her own choices. I knew she had a big presentation coming up, one that could potentially elevate her career to new heights. What if I could find a way to disrupt that? The very idea sent a thrill through me. I envisioned her standing in front of her colleagues, the spotlight shining bright, only to have her foundation slip away at the moment she needed it most. With each day that passed, I felt a sense of purpose infusing my being. Instead of the anguish that had once threatened to drown me, there was now determination, a steady resolve to see my plan through. I immersed myself in her world, learning more about her colleagues, her projects, and the dynamics of her workplace. As I gathered information, I began to put the finishing touches on my plan. I would leverage her ambitions against her, creating situations where she would be forced to confront the consequences of her actions without ever realizing that I was the architect of her demise. I envisioned scenarios where I could anonymously tip off her superiors about her behavior, where her late-night work sessions would raise eyebrows, and where her relationship with Daniel would become public gossip. In that moment, I found solace in the power of strategy. I was no longer just the heartbroken husband, I was the puppeteer, ready to pull the strings and watch the carefully woven web of deceit begin to unravel. I realized that while my heart had been shattered, my mind was sharper than ever, and I was ready to take action. The storm within me had transformed into a focused energy, one that would fuel my quest for justice. I would ensure that Mary understood the real cost of her betrayal. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but I felt invigorated by the thought of reclaiming my life. One calculated move at a time. The day of my meeting with Alex, my business partner, arrived with a mixture of anticipation and tension. I had carefully orchestrated every detail of this encounter, knowing that it would set the stage for my grand reveal. As I drove to our office, the weight of what I was about to do hung heavily in the air, filling the car with a charged silence. My heart raced with the knowledge that I was about to execute the first significant move in my plan for revenge against Mary. Arriving at the office, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. I had worked closely with Alex for years, and we had built a strong foundation of trust and camaraderie. He was not only my partner in business but also someone I considered a friend. However, I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't afford any distractions or emotional ties to interfere with the mission at hand. I found him in his office, reviewing a stack of reports. His brows furrowed in concentration as I knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Hey, Alex," I greeted him with a measured smile, masking the turmoil beneath. "Do you have a moment to talk?" "Of course. Come in," he replied, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I've been looking forward to discussing the deal. It's a big one." "Yeah, it is," I said, settling into the chair opposite him. I could see the excitement in his eyes as we began to talk about the details of the multi-million-dollar project we were set to sign off on in a matter of days. As we reviewed the numbers and projections, I felt a twinge of nostalgia for the good times we'd shared, countless late nights strategizing, celebrating victories, and even navigating the occasional setback together. But today was different. I needed to steer the conversation away from the usual banter and into the territory I had prepared. "Alex," I began, my voice steady, "there's something important I need to discuss with you regarding the partnership and this deal." He looked up, intrigued. "What's on your mind? Is there something I should be concerned about?" "No, it's not a concern," I reassured him, though inside I felt a surge of uncertainty. "It's more about direction, where I see us going after this deal is finalized." As I spoke, I carefully crafted my words, knowing I needed to frame my next steps in a way that would seem like a natural progression rather than a drastic shift. "I've been doing some thinking," I continued, "and I believe it might be time for me to hand off my share of the business to someone else." Alex's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Are you considering leaving the company?" "No, not leaving," I clarified. "But I've been feeling a bit detached lately, especially with everything going on in my personal life." I glanced at him, gauging his reaction. He nodded, clearly unsure where I was headed. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to drop the bombshell carefully. "Mary's been distant, and I'm starting to realize how much it's impacting my focus and drive. I think it might be best for me to step back and let someone else take my place while I sort through my issues." He leaned back in his chair, digesting my words. "You can't be serious. This is a critical time for the business. We need both of you, especially you, with your vision and leadership." "I appreciate that, Alex," I said, feeling a flicker of guilt. "But I think this is what's best for everyone involved. I've given it a lot of thought, and I believe I can transition my responsibilities to someone else who can keep the momentum going." "What about the deal we're about to sign?" he asked, concern etching lines on his face. "You're crucial to this partnership, and we've put in so much effort. Are you prepared to let someone else take over?" "Yes, and I want to ensure a smooth transition," I replied, trying to sound confident. "I've already identified someone who could step in, an associate I trust who could manage things effectively." Alex seemed to mull it over, the gears in his mind turning as he processed my words. "Who are you thinking of?" "Let's not get into specifics just yet," I replied, wanting to keep my cards close to my chest. "I'll introduce you to them after the deal is signed. Right now, I just want to make sure we get through this successfully, and then we can discuss the future." He sighed, shaking his head in disbelief. "This isn't like you, man. You've always been the one to push through adversity. Are you sure this is what you want?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. I need to do this for my sanity. And I hope you can support me in this choice." The silence stretched between us, and I could see the conflict in his expression. Finally, he nodded slowly. "If you feel that's what you need, I'll respect your decision. But I want to make sure this doesn't jeopardize everything we've built together. You're more than just a partner to me, you're a friend." His words hung in the air, and I felt a pang of regret, knowing that my actions would ultimately cause ripples in our relationship. "Thank you, Alex," I appreciate your understanding. I'll make sure the transition is as seamless as possible. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics of the deal, and I focused on the work, keeping my mind off the emotional turmoil churning within me. Every detail we discussed felt like a step closer to my plan taking shape, and the anticipation of what was to come only fueled my resolve. As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. I was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than ever. But I knew I had made the right choice to prepare Alex for what was to come, ensuring that when the time came, he would be a part of my master plan. I stepped into the elevator, the weight of my decision settling in, and as the doors closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to set in motion a series of events that would change everything, both for Mary and me. The next chapter was unfolding, and I was ready to take control of my destiny. One calculated move at a time. The day of the signing arrived, a day I had marked on my calendar for months with a sense of anticipation that had now morphed into an almost electrifying tension. The conference room was meticulously arranged, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and the faint rustle of papers being shuffled. The long oak table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and I couldn't help but notice how the shadows danced around the edges of the room, mirroring the turmoil within me. Today was the culmination of countless hours of hard work and planning, yet, for me, it held a far deeper significance. As I arrived at the office, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me, as if I were about to perform on a stage where the audience was entirely unaware of the drama set to unfold. I had dressed meticulously, opting for a sharp navy suit that mirrored my resolve. I wanted to project an image of confidence and poise, to mask the storm brewing beneath my composed exterior. As I entered the building, I exchanged pleasantries with colleagues and acquaintances, all the while maintaining a steady demeanor, a mask I had perfected over the past few weeks. In the moments leading up to the signing, I reviewed the documents, pretending to absorb the details while my mind raced ahead to the unexpected announcement I was about to make. I envisioned Mary, seated across the table, her face betraying a myriad of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and perhaps even anger, as I laid bare my plan. I felt an odd thrill at the thought of catching her off guard, watching her world shift as she grappled with the consequences of her actions. Finally, the moment arrived. The participants gathered in the conference room, Alex, several investors, and key stakeholders in the deal. They engaged in small talk, discussing projections and potential profits, but I remained quiet, absorbing every word while mentally preparing for what was to come. The atmosphere was charged with excitement, each person eager to finalize what could be one of the most lucrative deals of their careers. As we settled in, I could see Mary entering the room, her presence commanding yet unassuming. She greeted everyone with a radiant smile, the kind that had once melted my heart. But today, that smile felt like a mask she wore to hide her secrets. She glanced at me, and I met her gaze with a calm indifference, a silent acknowledgement of the truth we both knew. Once the preliminary discussions concluded, it was time to sign. Alex called for order, and I felt the room shift into a more serious tone. Papers were handed around, pens poised over contracts that would seal our fates. The air crackled with anticipation as I took a moment to absorb the scene, everyone ready to celebrate a victory while I prepared to unleash my carefully crafted surprise. Just as the signing ceremony commenced, I raised my hand slightly, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Before we proceed, I have something important to share," I announced, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of tension. The room fell silent, eyes shifting from the documents to my face, curiosity piqued. I took a breath, locking eyes with Mary for a split second before continuing. "Due to recent personal developments, I have decided to transfer my share of the business to another individual." The words hung in the air, palpable and heavy, the stunned silence that followed was almost deafening. Mary's expression shifted instantly, confusion etched across her face. "What are you talking about?" she interjected, her voice rising above the silence. "You can't just back out now." I pressed on, keeping my tone even and controlled. "I understand the timing may be surprising, but this is a decision I have contemplated thoroughly. My focus and commitment have waned due to changes in my personal life." The tension in the room escalated, and glances exchanged between Alex and the investors. I could sense their surprise morphing into apprehension, unsure of what my announcement meant for the future of the deal. I relished in the moment, the energy shifting from excitement to uncertainty. Who is taking over? One of the investors finally asked, breaking the silence. I hesitated for a moment, letting the weight of the question linger. I have identified a trusted associate who will be stepping into my role. I believe they will bring fresh perspectives and energy to the business. I paused, letting the gravity of my words sink in, observing Mary's face pale further, her confidence visibly shaken. This is ridiculous, Mary exclaimed, her voice trembling with disbelief. You can't just hand over everything we've worked for without consulting me. Consulting you? I shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. You're the one who has been busy elsewhere, focusing on your other priorities. I knew my words would cut deep, but there was no holding back now. The stakes were too high. The room erupted into a flurry of whispers, shockwaves radiating from my revelation. I could see the disbelief etched across Mary's face. The realization dawning upon her that her actions had led to this moment, an unexpected culmination of betrayal and consequence. Alex's brows knitted together as he processed my announcement. Are you sure this is what you want? He asked, concern creeping into his voice. I nodded firmly, feeling an unshakable resolve. Yes, I am certain. It's time for a new direction, and I believe this is the best course of action for everyone involved. As the tension in the room thickened, I could see the gears in Mary's mind turning. The realization hitting her that her career, her identity, and her aspirations were slipping through her fingers. I felt a strange sense of empowerment at that moment, knowing that I had turned the tables on her, a calculated move in a game I had not wanted to play, but one that had become necessary. Let's proceed with the signing, I said, breaking the charged silence, my voice firm and unwavering. As the pens began to move across the paper, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction in reclaiming my power and sorrow for the life we once shared. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of my plan unfolding before me. As the ink dried on the contracts, I understood that I had not only altered the trajectory of my life but had also irrevocably changed Mary's world. The signing was merely a formality, but its implications would resonate far beyond the confines of that conference room. With every signature, I felt the finality of it all. The deal was sealed, and so was her fate. I glanced at Mary one last time, her eyes wide with disbelief. And as I did, a sense of liberation washed over me. I was free from the shackles of betrayal, free to forge a new path without the weight of her deceit hanging over me. The stage was set, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the last pen was set down and the final document was signed, a profound silence enveloped the room. The triumphant air that had previously buzzed with excitement was now thick with disbelief and tension. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear or anxiety, but from an intoxicating sense of control. It was a moment I had meticulously crafted, and now I stood at the precipice, ready to watch Mary's world unravel. I turned my gaze toward her, fully prepared to absorb her reaction. What I saw sent a shiver down my spine. Her face had gone pale, a stark contrast to the vibrant persona she usually exuded. The confident, poised woman who had entered the room just moments before now appeared as if she had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the gears in her mind racing, attempting to comprehend the magnitude of what had just transpired. Are you serious? She managed to choke out, her voice shaking as she struggled to keep her composure. It was a desperate plea, as if she hoped I would retract my words, that this was merely some elaborate joke. But the gravity of the situation was unmistakable. I could see the reality crashing down around her like a wave, and the moment felt surreal. Yes, Mary, I'm serious, I replied, my tone steady, unyielding. This is what I've decided. You've made your choices, and now I'm making mine. There was a thrill in declaring my truth so openly, watching her struggle with the implications of my decision. Do you think this is the solution? Her voice rose, laced with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You're throwing everything away. This deal was supposed to be our opportunity. I could see the panic beginning to set in, her carefully curated facade crumbling as reality seeped in. It was supposed to be our opportunity, yes, I responded, my voice calm, almost soothing. But it's clear to me now that you've prioritized your desires over our partnership, over everything we built together. I can't continue to be a part of that. With every word, I felt an exhilarating sense of release. It was as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, even as I saw the devastation reflected in her eyes. Mary had always prided herself on her ambition and her ability to control every aspect of her life. And now, standing before her, I was dismantling that very illusion. Her expression morphed from disbelief to frustration, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You think this is about my ambitions?" she retorted, her voice rising higher, nearly trembling. "This isn't just a job for me, Alex. It's my life. You're throwing it all away without a second thought." Her words were tinged with desperation, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I quickly extinguished that thought. I couldn't allow myself to feel pity. This was about empowerment and reclaiming my narrative. I had to remain steadfast in my resolve, even as I watched the emotions play out across her face. "Maybe it's time you reevaluate what's truly important to you," I said, my voice firm. "You made choices that put your career ahead of our relationship. You chose him." The last words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their truth. I had not just taken away her business, I had taken away the very foundation upon which she had built her identity. Mary's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I could see her grappling with the gravity of the moment. "You don't understand," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're doing to me. I can't just lose everything because of a mistake I made. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me," I shot back, my words sharp as daggers. "This isn't just a mistake, Mary. This is the consequence of your actions, and you're finally facing it." As the room filled with silence once more, I noticed the investors exchanging wary glances, unsure of how to react to the emotional outburst unfolding before them. Their eyes darted between us, caught in the crossfire of our confrontation, as if they were spectators at a play. But I was no longer interested in their opinions. This moment was ours, Mary's and mine, and I was determined to see it through. "Alex, please," she implored, her voice breaking, the veneer of her composure shattering before me. "Don't do this. You're making a huge mistake. I can change. I'll fix everything." The desperation in her voice struck a chord deep within me, stirring memories of the woman I had once loved. But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. I had to remain steadfast. "It's too late for that, Mary. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. The deal is done, and I won't be going back on my word." I watched as her expression shifted again, the realization of her lost power settling heavily on her shoulders. "You're going to throw away everything we've worked for?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the fight draining from her. "All for a moment of revenge?" "Revenge?" I echoed, shaking my head slowly. "This isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming my life and my choices. I refuse to be a pawn in your game any longer. I've taken back my power." The silence that followed was deafening. The emotions swirled around us, anger, despair, betrayal, but I stood my ground, unwavering. I could see the walls closing in around her, the crushing weight of her reality settling in as the truth sunk deeper. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "But I won't be a part of it anymore." With that, I turned away from her, leaving the remnants of our shattered partnership behind. As I walked toward the door, I could feel her eyes on me, the weight of her disbelief and heartbreak pressing against my back. I had made my choice, and as I stepped out of that conference room, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. This was the moment of transformation, not just for her, but for me as well. I had stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, leaving the echoes of our past behind. The day of signing had become a pivotal moment, a decisive turning point in my life, a farewell to what was and an embrace of what could be. As I left the conference room, the weight of my actions began to settle heavily in the air around me. I could still hear Mary's voice echoing in my mind, a symphony of desperation and disbelief that contrasted sharply with the growing sense of relief blossoming within me. The heavy door swung shut behind me, sealing off the chaos I had left behind. I knew what lay ahead for her, and that knowledge brought a certain peace to my heart. Mary was now standing at the precipice of a new reality, a reality devoid of the security and power she had taken for granted. I could picture her sitting in that conference room, surrounded by our former colleagues. Her mind racing with thoughts and fears. Her career, once a shining beacon of success, now felt precarious, hanging by a thread. I could almost hear the whispers, the murmurs of disbelief and judgment, swirling around her like a storm. The business world was unforgiving. News of my departure would spread like wildfire, and the consequences for Mary would be immediate. Investors, clients, and even friends would begin to question her competence and decision-making skills. I imagined the conversations unfolding behind closed doors. The way my choice would ripple through the industry like a seismic shock. As I walked through the familiar corridors of the office, I could hear snippets of conversation, the excited chatter about the signing, and the plans for future collaborations. But beneath that surface level of excitement lay an undercurrent of uncertainty, a question mark looming over the future of the deal and, by extension, Mary's career. I had pulled the rug out from under her, and the repercussions would be profound. In the days that followed, I envisioned her grappling with the fallout of my decision. The meetings that would go sour, the clients who would withdraw their support, and the colleagues who would doubt her leadership. Mary had always relied on her ambition and charisma to navigate her career, but now, those very traits would be tested in ways she had never anticipated. The realization that she had not only lost her business but also her partner in crime would weigh heavily on her conscience. I imagined the sleepless nights she would endure, the nagging doubt creeping in as she reflected on her choices. For me, the aftermath was bittersweet. I had regained my autonomy, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness at the thought of the woman I once loved. I remembered the moments we had shared, the laughter, the dreams, the plans for a future that now lay in ruins. Yet, I had to remind myself that she had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. As I stepped out of the building and into the bustling city streets, I felt the weight of my decision lift. I could see the sunlight pouring through the trees, casting a warm glow over the pavement. The world outside was alive and vibrant with energy, and I was ready to embrace it. My heart swelled with a sense of newfound freedom, a feeling that had been absent for far too long. I was no longer shackled by the betrayal that had haunted me. I was stepping into a future of my own making. I had no illusions about the path ahead. I knew there would be challenges and uncertainties, but I also felt a sense of purpose. I was determined to rebuild my life on my terms, to redefine my identity outside of the shadow of my past. The consequences of my actions would ripple through Mary's life, but in that moment, I chose to focus on my journey. As I walked away from the office, I couldn't help but reflect on the gravity of what had just transpired. I had orchestrated a dramatic exit, one that would echo in the halls of our former lives. The finality of my decision settled over me like a comforting blanket. I had severed the ties that bound me to a relationship fraught with betrayal, and I felt a surge of empowerment. I glanced back at the building one last time, the facade that had housed our shared dreams and aspirations. It felt like a lifetime ago when we had stepped into that place, filled with hope and ambition. Now, it stood as a monument to the choices we had made, choices that had led us down divergent paths. Mary would be left in disarray, grappling with the fallout of our partnership unraveling. I imagined her sitting in her empty office, surrounded by remnants of our collaboration, photos from company events, awards celebrating our successes, and the stark reality of the emptiness that now permeated her world. The shock of losing not just her business but also the support of someone who had been by her side for years would hit her harder than any loss she had faced before. But as I continued walking, I felt a lightness in my step, a buoyancy that had been absent for too long. I had reclaimed my narrative. I was free to chart my course, seek out new opportunities, and focus on my own goals without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. As I reached the corner of the street, I paused for a moment, taking in the world around me. The laughter of children playing in the park, the hustle and bustle of people going about their daily lives, the sun shining brightly above. It felt like a fresh start, a blank canvas waiting for me to paint my own story. I knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready to face them head on. With one final glance back at the office, I turned and walked away, leaving behind not just the memories of our shared life but also the pain that had accompanied it. I was stepping into a new chapter, and this time, I was the one holding the pen. At that moment, I knew that I would rise above the ashes of our past. I would rebuild, stronger and more resilient than before, knowing that I had made the right choice for myself. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace every moment of it, unencumbered by the weight of betrayal or the shadows of a broken partnership. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and smiled. This was my time. As I stepped into this new chapter of my life, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling within me. The city, with all its bustling energy and endless possibilities, seemed to beckon me forward. I began exploring new interests, diving into hobbies I had neglected while wrapped up in the whirlwind of my former life. Photography became a newfound passion. Capturing moments through the lens of a camera helped me see beauty in the world again. I spent weekends wandering through art galleries, capturing the vibrancy of life around me, and reveling in the freedom to simply be myself. It wasn't long before I started meeting new people, individuals who shared my passions and ambitions. One evening at a local gallery opening, I crossed paths with Sarah, an artist with a radiant smile and an infectious laugh. Her passion for her work drew me in, and we quickly struck up a conversation. As we talked about art, life, and our dreams for the future, I felt a connection that I hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time since the fallout with Mary, I found myself genuinely laughing and enjoying the moment without any lingering bitterness. Sarah had a refreshing outlook on life that inspired me to embrace my newfound freedom. She was adventurous, always suggesting impromptu road trips to explore the countryside or spontaneous late-night walks through the city. Each shared moment felt like a celebration of our journeys, and I relished the thrill of discovering someone new. With her, I felt unburdened to be myself, unrestrained by the past. As our relationship blossomed, I began to open up about my experiences with Mary. I shared the pain of betrayal and the journey toward healing. Sarah listened with empathy, offering support without judgment. It was a breath of fresh air to be with someone who valued honesty and vulnerability. Together, we created a space where we could both grow, not only as individuals but also as partners navigating the complexities of life and love. With Sarah by my side, I rediscovered joy in the small things, cooking dinner together, late-night stargazing, and sharing dreams over coffee. Each moment with her was a reminder of how far I had come and how much I had to look forward to. I realized that love didn't have to be a battleground, it could be a sanctuary, a place where we could both thrive and support one another. As I embraced this new life, I learned to appreciate the beauty of second chances. My journey with Sarah felt like a rebirth, an opportunity to redefine love on my terms. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to navigate life's uncertainties, knowing that I was finally free to choose a path that aligned with my true self.